Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the first week of 2023. Yes, happy new year 2023 everybody. These are the horoscopes that start on the 1st and end on the 7th. So the first full week of the year. It's also our first full week with the Mercury retrograde. I mean, if you're going to have a new year, you might as well start it off with the Mercury retrograde, right? I mean, we started and ended the last one with the Mercury retrograde and we survived it. I mean, obviously, we're here. You're watching. You're here. That means that you partied safely too. Yay, good for you. Or you're like me and didn't bother partying at all because, well, after the first 10 years, it just got boring. So, anyways, good that you're all here and we're all ready to embrace this new year. Some of you might be a little bit hungover, but being hungover is for wussies, guys. It's time. If you're going to make something out of the year, it takes you to get things started. So that is our MO for this first week of the year. We're going to go ahead and get started, see what it looks like. We're going to get started with Aries. I'm going to go ahead and start you off with being hungover is for wussies, guys. Come on. I know it's rough coming off of New Year's Eve. Actually, in all honesty, it never made any sense to me. You get all excited about a new year and the new possibilities, but right before it starts, you go and get so drunk that you stay in bed for the whole first day of the year. It just doesn't make any sense to me anymore. So let's try not to do that. But if it's too late and you already did, well, water. Lots and lots of water. That's what you need. We've got Jupiter in Aries, of course, this week. Jupiter's sextiles with looks like Mercury, Pluto, and Venus are actually very helpful at this time, specifically because your focus Aries focus is on self, but Jupiter's focus continues to be on that inner closet. So we're still not quite done processing some old crap that we don't really want to deal with. But if you deal with it now, the chances of you having to deal with it again in the same way are not very good. So you might as well just deal with it now. Trust me, putting anything off just makes the process longer, in all honesty. When you're talking about Jupiter influencing that secret house, that is also a little bit tricky. Jupiter's all about growth and expansion. So you can look at this from two different ways. One, growth and expansion happens when you let go of old crap. So for instance, you can't buy new furniture while the old furniture that's falling the old ugly furniture that's falling apart is still sitting there. I mean, obviously there's no room for new furniture. You have to get rid of the old stuff in order to bring the new stuff in. And that's why we have to have this time to focus on our inner trauma. It makes it very difficult to see things, to see possibilities when you still have those traumas holding you down, so to speak. So in terms of focus on self, this is actually a really important part of self-care. And these days I'm noticing that a lot of people are looking at self-care in terms of spoiling themselves, hot baths, time for yourself. I mean, all those things are wonderful. And I 100% agree and practice those types of self-care techniques as well on a regular basis. But nobody wants to sit down and deal with a trigger. No one wants to sit down and deal with old pain. We tend to try and avoid it and shift our focus onto somebody else. There's a lot of people, Aries especially, that I know that are cleaners. When they get really upset, they clean in order to get rid of that energy, but they're not necessarily working through the problem either. So I really feel that this week it's important to just make sure that you're not holding on to anything from last year that you don't need to be holding on to anymore. It's a clean slate. We're moving into new possibilities, new directions. It doesn't mean you're not going to repeat the past. I mean, we all repeat the past in some way, shape, or form. But if you've learned lessons from repeating past mistakes, the chances of that are less, that you're actually going to repeat it again. So Learn the lessons now so you don't have to repeat them later. Bottom line, that's really what it's all about for you guys. So make sure as you're trying to set up your goals and your plans for this year, you're not hanging on to old mindsets or any old emotional garbage that's going to play into that in a way that is not helpful for you. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Taurus, we're going to kick off the year and the week with the moon in your sign. And if you're already hungover, well, that is just going to make it a little bit worse, I'm afraid. Being hungover is for wussies, by the way. Yes, that's going in every single sign this week because I can. So yes, being hungover is for wussies, being tired is for wussies too. And yet at the same time, we're focused on self here. We've got the moon in conjunction with Uranus, which is continuing to be squared with Saturn this week throughout the end of the week as well. It looks like no, that's very good news. That square is going to end. Look at that. We have here, we have it here, we have it here, and then gone by Thursday. Yay! I am so excited for you guys, and I'm excited for myself too, because of course, as an Aquarius, I've been a part of this for a really long time, and I'm over it just as much as you are. So we're talking about, or I was just talking about an Aries, looking at the year with a new set of hope and, some new faith, a new set of eyes that are a little bit more hopeful. And that actually ending is really going to make that a whole lot easier, because we've already dealt with a lot of just old junk that we don't want to deal with anymore. We've worked through that. We've let it go. It doesn't feel right to keep going into the year dragging along this square behind us. It has been a nightmare for a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of other Aquarians and Tauruses, and I'm telling you, we've all had a lot of difficulties. Really, really happy to see that ending. But of course, we're going to kick off the year with the moon in your sign in conjunction with Uranus, still in that square with Saturn for the first few days of the year. So it may feel like it's a little bit of a slow getting to that point, but once that square ends, oh, it's going to feel so freeing. I mean, I've been waiting for it for a long time myself. So I'm really looking forward to that. Focus is on self and self-care. Uranus does continue to be retrograde this week. That retrograde is not going to end this week, but Uranus does move into a trine with the Sun and Mercury this week, which is much more helpful than that square with Saturn has been. In terms of what this trine means, Uranus's focus is on self, and Mercury and the Sun, Mercury being retrograde too, are focused on career. Now, this is very interesting. Mercury retrogrades always cause problems. Yes, they do. It's what they're known for. But the problems are a lot of the times there to help you as well. And sometimes chaos has to happen in order for you to open your eyes and see what you're supposed to learn from the situation. In terms of your career, I feel like two things are coming up. One, with Uranus in retrograde, Uranus is all about going out of the box, being unique, not following the crowd. In retrograde, we're talking more of a traditional way of doing things. So if you're looking to move forward in your career, you definitely don't want to go for an out of the box solution. We want to actually go for a more traditional, this is how we've been doing it for a long time, sort of of an approach. Of course, individualize it and make it yours as much as possible. But we don't want to go a little too crazy, to the point where people are like, okay, what is this woman's problem over here? Which we all have a tendency to do every now and then. Also, it's really hard for a fixed sign to do that anyways. Fixed signs are usually, this is how I do it, and I'm always going to do it this way. So that makes it easier for you with that Uranus retrograde there. Also, with Mercury retrograde there, two things, of course. One, you want to leave things open for delays and have patience and all that crap. But also, this is not about talking about what you can do. This is about showing what you can do. And that Mercury retrograde, Mercury is all about communication. When you retrograde that, to me, that means silence the words and just show them what you got, right? It makes it easier. In my view, it's always easier for me to show you what I can do rather than tell you what I can do. It's always hard for us to sell ourselves. Most people have a hard time with that. But I feel that this goes deeper than that. I really feel that it's not so much that you shouldn't be talking about yourself. It's more about limiting the words. So a lot of us happen to be, and I'm one of those people, obviously. A lot of us happen to be people who use too many words. We use way too many words to describe something, and I feel that this is not going to help you. You need to get words that are straight and to the point, and so that you can move on to the next thing. And really, it's all about showing what you can do rather than telling them what you can do, if that makes sense. So that's actually going to be very helpful for you if you're looking towards moving up in your career, or maybe even changing your career this week. Also, because we're focused on self and Uranus is focused on self, it's also really important to remember something. You want to hold out for the job that you deserve, not the job that somebody else thinks that you deserve. And that's also part of that planet lineup as well. Are we going to talk about Uranus squared with Saturn for the first few days of the week? No, other than Saturn's focus is on those that support you. Obviously, that creates a little bit of a challenge. Your responsibility is to support yourself. It's not anybody else's responsibility to do that. And really, that's what comes out of that. So this is a you thing. This is not a you and this guy and this girl and this guy over here. This is a you thing. You're the one that needs to do it. So if you find yourself in a situation at the beginning of the week where, or maybe last week, everybody was like, oh my God, yeah, you'd be great for that job. I'll support you 100%. And then all of a sudden they're not there. That's why. And just because they're not there does not mean that you can't move forward with your goals. So that's what I have for you guys this week. I've been waiting for a long time to be able to tell you that square is over, and I'm very happy that we finally got there. Yay. Okay, moving on to Gemini. Still have Mars in Gemini, still have Mars retrograde in Gemini. That is going to continue through this week. We are also going to have the moon in Gemini this week as well, which is always unpleasant, but it's okay. We'll get through it. Moon and Mars in conjunction with each other on Tuesday. And Wednesday, the moon will be in there as well. Both planets in a looks like a trine with drum roll please, with Venus, who moves into Aquarius actually this week. So as Venus is moving into Aquarius, both of these planets are moving into a trine with Venus as well. I love when Venus and Mars work together. I especially love when Venus and Mars work together for intellectual signs. And of course, we're talking two intellectual signs here as Venus is moving into Aquarius. Intellectual signs are very logic based. So they're also very masculine based signs. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. You think in a logical black and white way. It is either going to work or it is not going to work. It doesn't mean that you can't find a way to make something that doesn't work work. We're intellect, so we could probably find the answer to that, no problem. But we're used to looking at things in a logical way and not a creative way. And that's really what this is all about. Venus is all about creativity, and Mars is that masculine logic, right? And what is exciting about this, especially with focus on the past, and Venus's focus being on career, it's actually asking you or reminding you to look back at times where maybe you were a little bit more creative than you are right now and see how successful that was for you. Sometimes being an intellectual line myself, creativity is not my forte. It happens sometimes. I get a little bug up my rear, and it happens sometimes, but it's not something I go out of my way to use on a regular basis, because let's face it, if it's not your strong suit, you're not going to use it. Bringing that creative influence into your career, however, just because it's not your strong point doesn't mean that you shouldn't use it either. Sometimes it's very necessary, and especially necessary when that is what's going to separate you from everybody else. If everybody else is black and white, you just see it's like what they call the plastic people of Hollywood, where they've all had some sort of work on their face, and they all have big boobs, and all of these women all look exactly the same. You don't want to be in that situation where you are exactly the same as everybody else. That little bit of a creative influence comes in to give you some ideas that actually bump you above those people in such a way that you stand out over them. And that's actually very helpful. The moon's influence in this is actually also helpful to you, because, of course, you're not looking at this as it's just a job and I need a job. You're looking at the reason behind why you need a job. I need security. I need a paycheck. I need money in the bank. I need to pay my bills, blah, blah, blah. And while that is a logical thing, that is also an emotional thing as well. And when you connect money as an emotional thing, there are some people, of course, who can take it to another level, but you want your money to be an emotional thing to a certain extent, because that's what keeps you going to get it, right? And security is really what it's all about. So I feel like this is really lining up for you guys, because the planets are not lining up in negative ways, only positive ways. The only negativity here is that Mars is retrograde. And really what's negative about that is that your normal energy level, which is way up here for most Geminis that I know, is not way up here. It's sort of down here. The good thing about that is that most of the Geminis that I know have so much energy, they bounce and bounce and bounce from one thing to another so incredibly quickly that they're missing things. Bringing that energy level down here and slowing you down helps you to not miss those important checkpoints that you need to not miss in order to move forward. And it keeps things nice and organized as well. Because, of course, if you're bouncing from one thing to another, you're not organized at all. So it's also showing you a different way of doing things in a way that might just be a little bit more comfortable for you. Yes, in your 20s, you can bounce from one thing to another with ease, no problem. But once you start hitting your 40s and your 50s, and your energy starts to go down a little bit more, it becomes a lot more difficult. So this Mars retrograde is sort of showing you that. Hopefully before you get to those ages, is sort of showing you that, and showing you that you can still get the same amount of things done in the same amount of time by just doing one thing at a time and getting things off your plate. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Cancer, a focus is on the home this week. The moon moves into Cancer on Thursday, rounding out the week in Cancer, bringing your focus on how you think, as well as your home and environment as well. How you think about your home and environment actually is a big deal. And a lot of people at the beginning of the year really do like to take the time to reorganize their space, which could be part of it for you guys this year. But I also feel with the moon's influence is actually going to bring a little bit of challenge in there as we kick off the week with the moon in a square with Jupiter. Jupiter's focus is on that secret closet. Now, when you're talking about an emotional influence over how you think, lining up with an influence of a growing and expanding influence on your secret closet, there's a couple of things that come up with that for me. One is that how you think about certain situations really does have an effect on how much power that situation does have. Now, I've said this to people, and of course, a lot of people will disagree with that, and I don't blame them for disagreeing with it because 20 years ago, I disagreed with it too. If you have trauma, how else can you possibly think about it? Well, as you go through your healing process, the way that you think about those things actually does change. Whether you want to make the change or not, it does take on a different meaning. For instance, 20 years ago, growing up in a extremely volatile and abusive situation just made me angry all the time. And I was literally angry all the time. I didn't trust anybody ever. It made it very difficult for me to build solid relationships. As I went through my healing process, I'm not angry all the time anymore. I don't have anger constantly over it. Occasionally it comes up. I deal with it when it comes up, and then I move on to the next thing. So it does become easier. And as well as now that my perception of it has changed, the way that I live with it has changed as well. And its emotional effect on me has changed. And it makes it easier for me to look at it in a different way. And the different way is I'm not exactly thrilled that I grew up in a traumatic environment, but I'm grateful because being in the position of helping other people who grew up in traumatic places, I can help them. I can connect with them. Had I not had that experience, I would not be able to connect with them in the same way. So I have an appreciation for it. Still would have liked to not live it, but I do have an appreciation for it. As the moon moves into opposition on Friday and Saturday with the sun and Mercury, we're looking at the moon being still bringing that how you think influence as well as the home influence. So a couple of different things come up. One, work is getting in the way of you being able to just hide at home, which happens to most of us, honestly. The other thing is that Mercury being in retrograde, a couple of things. I see a couple of things coming from this. One, um, I feel like if you're making any career goals currently during this time, you're probably, first of all, you do want to be aware of where your mind goes. Most people, they say that this is something that I should do. However, here's a list of reasons why it wouldn't work, right? Before you even started the process, before you've even tried to do anything, you've already got a list of reasons why that may not work. And on that list are things that are just sometimes absolutely ridiculous. Like, what if I work there and a meteor hits that spot on the earth and that's it? The meteor could hit your house while you're sitting there hiding inside of your house. Most people don't actually come up with that, but the extremes of what we worry about are pretty far-fetched in many ways. So you want to be aware of whether or not your brain is doing this to you and put the cap on it. Obviously, we human beings, we want to see what the potential problems of something are ahead of time so that we can be prepared. That's our excuse, okay? The truth is that we are actually coming up with excuses not to move forward in this particular career goal. So it might be a great opportunity, but it's a little bit scary. And you're just going back and forth in your mind going, oh my God, all these horrible things could happen. And then if they do, and I didn't take this other road, which could be more stable, by the way, you got a bag of excuses for that one too. It goes on and on and on. And you're exhausting yourself in the process. It's very easy. Take it out of your head, write it down on a piece of paper, pros and cons, what's good about taking this opportunity, what's not good about taking this opportunity, and base your decision on that, but not out of fear of what could happen. The truth of the matter is, I've seen a lot of young people lately, some of my own young people really, and they work at a place for a while and then they say, you know what, I don't like the way they run the place, it's a bunch of corporate BS, I'm not going to be involved in that. They quit. and they don't have jobs for months. And then they go, this is going to be a much better place for me. And they're there for a few weeks and they go, yeah, it just didn't work out. Right. You're never going to find a job that you love. I'm sorry. But, if you're working for somebody else, you're never going to find a job that you love. And even if you love what you do, there's going to be problems. It is what it is. I run my own business. I love helping people. I love what I do. I don't love the running the business part. I don't love hunting down money. There's a lot of aspects of the business that I don't love. I do love helping people. I do love that. But some people can be difficult to help also. There's a lot of variables. Even if you're doing what you love, you're still going to have things about that you don't love. And so trying to find something that you're just absolutely going to love without any of the aspects that you don't love, that is absolutely impossible. You just can't do it. So you don't want to come up with all of those things, or create those problems, make those problems excuses. Obviously, if they're doing something horrible, like they're not paying you or it's very unhealthy for you to work there, I agree, you shouldn't work there. But if you're nitpicking every little problem, that is ultimately going to be a problem for you later. So you really do kind of want to put the kibosh on that, if that makes sense. So a little bit of a challenge there for you guys with the moon coming in. But at the same time, I think, you guys, one, you guys are moon babies. Two, I feel that this is less about it being a problem and more about identifying a problem that you may have so that you can eliminate that problem, because it really is holding you back from moving forward. And we think, especially when you're young, we think we have all kinds of time in the world. We find out it takes what seems like 5 minutes for 20 years to go by. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've been sitting here thinking about doing this for 20 years now. It doesn't take long for that to happen. And you go, wow, now I have even less time. And if you're not 20 years old, if you're in your 40s or 50s, then you have even less time to sit here and go back and forth on whether or not you're going to take this opportunity. What have you got to lose? That's what you need to look at. What have you got to lose? And is it something that interests you? Then go for it. And if it's not something that interests you, well, then it might be a good idea to look into something else. That's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Leo. We have literally dodged the bullet this week. The moon ends in Cancer this week, but we'll be kicking off the week with the moon in Leo next week. So enjoy this moon-free week before it comes in next week. Probably moving into some pretty gnarly aspects with other planets, because they are there and they're not moving before next week. It's just not going to happen. We are focused on those you love this week. Focus is on family mainly this week. There's a couple of things actually coming up with that. One, we just got off of the Christmas holiday, and getting off of the Christmas holiday, we probably had to spend a whole lot of time with the people we love, so to speak. So you can go one of two ways with that. Some people love spending time with their family. It's their favorite thing in the world because they have wonderful families, and some people don't. They don't have wonderful families. They don't enjoy spending time with their family. I tend to look at this as sort of a free for all, as I like to call it. It can mean something to one person, but not necessarily the same thing to another. What I do see specifically is that family is taking on a prominent role. And as you're moving into that focus of family, we'll be moving into that focus for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Because that's usually about how long we stay in that focus until we move on to something else. So to start off the year with focus on family, for most people, that seems a little weird. For Leos, Not really. Leos generally are very family-oriented signs. They enjoy having family around. For the most part, they enjoy bringing family together, and they enjoy doing everything that they possibly can for family. But even if they enjoy that, that does get kind of difficult, especially if you have difficult family members. It's important, of course, if that is the case, to lay down boundaries with those wonderful family members of yours. It does help improve your relationship on all sides. The other thing that is really coming up around this is right on the cusp of Leo is the Lilith or dark moon. And the Lilith is all about making drastic changes. And when it comes to having difficult relationships with your family members, it's time to make some drastic changes in terms of how you actually communicate with them. We're also in a Mercury retrograde right now, which is going to cause problems and it's going to cause miscommunications. So it's really important also not to jump the gun on a reaction, but make sure that you really pay attention, sit down, think about what you're going to say before you say it. That way you don't wind up saying something that is actually not what you should be saying because you misunderstood what somebody was saying or they misunderstood what you were saying, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Virgo, focuses on your day-to-day activities, your daily schedule. Not surprising at all, actually, for you Virgos, because this is your sweet spot right here. My agenda. What's on my agenda today? I see this playing out in a couple of different ways. One, you're looking at the year, you're making your schedule, you're in terms of creating goals, Virgos hands down have it down better than any other sign. So I really feel that that's part of it, is looking at your year to date goals, but also I am seeing for you guys a little bit of changes in how you deal with your weekly schedule, if that makes sense, or even your daily schedule. Um, in some cases, not exactly a great idea to add more to that schedule, especially if you don't have a lot of time already. But I feel that actually it's less about what you're adding to it and more about how you're adding to it. It's very important that your schedule includes everything that you need to do and a little time for you as well. Virgos are not known for self-care. I'm not saying that they don't do self-care. I'm saying that they're not known for self-care. And what that basically means is that everything and everyone and work and money and everything else is on that schedule, and there's no time for you, the Virgo, on that schedule. You don't have to put that time in there every single day. I block out one day a week, every single week, unless I have to use that week. And that is usually a rough week when I don't get my self-care day, but it's okay. I can deal with one. Two is a bit much, but I can deal with one. One day a week or one day every other week, something that even a half a day, something that just allows you to unplug, decompress, and relax. Virgos are known for nervousness, for anxiety. The sign of Virgo rules the nervous system. What happens when you don't relax? Your nervous system is all high strung. You get anxious. You start to have all of these other problems. You're trying to push those problems away so you can focus on what you need to do. It becomes a roller coaster that does not end very pretty. Self-care, you, the Virgo, needs to be on that schedule. And I feel that's really important in terms of starting off the new year here. Your New Year's resolution should be taking care of you properly. Now, some self-care things that people put down as self-care, like I'm just going to go unplug and go out on a night of drinking. That's not self-care. That is self-destruction. Yes, you're not focused on work. Yes, you might be a little bit more relaxed, but now you're creating a problem that is going to move into tomorrow, that you're going to fight through all day because you have a busy schedule. And of course, you're hungover in the process. Your energy level is low. It is just the you know what rolls downhill. I'm talking about true self-care. I'm talking about meditation. I'm talking about rest. I'm talking about relaxation. I'm talking about aromatherapy. I'm talking about whatever it takes to get you to chill and relax. And I know, sit still, even for 10 minutes. I know it's a hard thing for me to ask for, but I guarantee you will thank me for it if you do it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Libra, focus continues to be on relationships, but with Ceres' influence now dominating your sign, her influence is focused on your day-to-day schedule. This is actually a really interesting combination here. When we're talking about relationships and Ceres being a very maternal influence, a very nurturing influence, and we're nurturing your daily schedule, sort of to me feels like it's really important to look at your daily schedule to determine what it is that you're doing that you love to do and what it is that you're doing because you are required to do it. Now, Libras, let's just face it, it's the beginning of a new year here. Um, we've all dealt with things that maybe we don't want to do on a regular basis. And Libras, being known as martyrs, number one, they tend to sacrifice themselves, their needs, what they want for everybody else. And while I'm not saying stop that right now and don't do it anymore, why take up all of your time on somebody else? Why not focus some of that time on your needs, on what you want to do, on what you want to accomplish? This is really important. It's hard for Libras to do because it's just not in their nature to think of themselves above other people. It's in their nature to think of other people before themselves, which is a beautiful thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that until you're self-sacrificing, constantly self-sacrificing, and then it becomes a problem. So this week it's just a really good time, I feel, for you guys to take a look at your schedule to determine how much of that time is spent on everybody else and what they need, and how much of that time is not spent focused on your ambition, your goals, your needs, and even important, what you want out of life. You can't Let's put it this way. At the end of your life, when you're reviewing, when you know it's done, are you going to be satisfied completely with the fact that you sacrificed everything you wanted to do for other people? Or do you want to see some of those accomplishments for yourself in there as well? We don't think about that on a day-to-day basis, but time moves by so fast, we don't realize that we've spent all of our time on somebody else and none of our time on things that we wanted to do. And that is very important to everybody, especially you Libras. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Scorpio. Focus continues to be on finances this week, moving into the new year with focus on finances. As we round out the end of the week, focus is right on the cusp of finances and relationships. Let's talk about your relationship with money here for a minute, because yes, we do have relationships with our money. We do have money mindsets that affect everything that we do in some way, shape, or form. But I also really just want to point out here that when it comes to finances, I think the biggest thing here is your money mindset that determines your relationship with money. Most of us are in this mindset of we get money and then we give it away and then we never have any for ourselves. And if your mind is focused on that, the reality will continue to be that way. I'm not saying that by all of a sudden changing your mindset, which is impossible anyways, but I'm not saying that just by changing your mindset, all of a sudden all this money is going to come. It doesn't really work like that either. But if you have a mindset of I keep getting money in the house and then it keeps going out, it doesn't matter how much money comes in, you're always going to be in that sort of hamster wheel that money comes in and then you have to give it away. There's always somebody there with their hand out. And the truth of the matter is, in life, there is always somebody there with their hand out. Never fails when you have that mindset. You get all your bills paid, you have a little bit of extra money, and then all of a sudden the maintenance light comes on in your car, and that extra $100 is going to an oil change. It never fails, right? Bottom line here is that it really comes down to how much of an influence does money have over your life. A lot of people, money affects them emotionally. They're very happy when they got money in the bank. They're very mad when the money is gone, which means for most of us, you're only happy for a minute and then you're unhappy again afterwards because you've paid all of your bills. If that is the case for you, then this is a problem because it means that you're never going to be happy. All of your happiness is focused on how much money you have in the bank. And that's not good. That also affects your mindset and it drags you down. So to even think about the possibility of coming up with more money, it's just impossible at this point because you've already decreed that you're never going to have any money, period. Bottom line for this is I really feel that two things are coming up. One, because there's still a focus on relationships there, it might not be a bad idea to sit down and take a look at how some of these relationships may be draining your account, because that does happen from time to time. You know, if you have children, there's little money suckers is what they are. Love them, but they're money suckers. The other thing is your own relationship with money. How do you look at money? Is money a tool that you use in order to get the things that you think are going to make you happy? Does it completely control your whole entire life? Or is it just something that is part of life? Which in my personal money mindset, which is still not as healthy as I would like to be, my way of dealing with that is to not focus so much of my mental energy on money. What do I need? That is hard to do. But when I find myself obsessing over money, I stop myself. I identify that I'm doing it and I stop myself and I focus my time on something else. Truth of the matter is, the bills always get paid. Money always comes and goes. It is something that is fluid and it is supposed to flow in and flow out. That is its ultimate goal. If you were sitting in a house with piles and piles of money, there's no guarantee that that would bring you happiness either. We just think it does because we've never been in that situation, sitting in a house with piles and piles of money that belong to us, right? So because we've never been in that situation, we automatically assume that that's what brings happiness. Not necessarily. There's other problems that come with sitting in a house full of money, like relatives you didn't know you had that are all of a sudden your new best friends and you got to deal with them and get rid of them and all that kind of stuff. Bottom line is, if you want to solve your money problems, you have to look at the relationship that you have with money and the mindset that you have with money. Those two things are really important, and your money situation will never change until you nail those two things. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Sagittarius, focus is on finances as well as your long-term goals this week. Long-term financial goals, anybody? This is actually a perfect time to take a look at your finances and set some long-term financial goals. And it's really important also to add in there that in terms of your long-term financial goals, most of us are focused on how much money we want to make. throughout the year. But I also think it's important to incorporate into those financial goals how much money we want to save throughout the year. That helps us to make a little bit extra money, or to at least hold on to some of the money that we do have, which is good. The other thing that is very interesting that a lot of people miss in terms of their financial goals is specific dates of when they want to accomplish certain things. Now, obviously, if you're looking to change your career in order to meet these financial goals, and you want to make a certain amount of money, and this career is going to make you a certain amount of money every week, you want to make sure that you have that job in time to achieve those goals by the end of the year. So you can't just look at it and say, okay, I'm here at the beginning of the year. I want to make this much money by the end of the year, and not set any due dates of when you need to get those things done in the middle of the year there or throughout the year, because you will not achieve your goal, unfortunately. So you really want to look at realistic goals for what you can do, what you are willing to do, and what you need to do in order to achieve those goals. For most of us, it's easier to start small. This is what we're working with right now. How can we make cuts over here and over here to get a little bit of extra money? I have a very specific job to do now. For me, it's taking care of my grandmother twice a week. So whatever I do, my goals have to fit around that because I can't omit that. So you also have to take those things into consideration as well. Honestly, planning goals is like Sagittarian's dream, really. The key is the follow through, and that's another reason why checkpoints are really important. When you add checkpoints to those goals, you allow yourself a time to be able to sit down and make sure that you're doing what you said you were going to do in the first place, because life happens and we get distracted and we move on to something else, and 6 months later we forgot we set this goal in the first place. So setting up those checkpoints help to keep you on track, to make sure that you are where you want to be. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Capricorn, we got all kinds of stuff happening in Capricorn. In fact, Capricorn is where it is happening this week. We've got, of course, the retrograde Mercury in Capricorn in conjunction with the Sun by the end of the week. And we also have Pluto 27 degrees. We are officially in the year where Pluto is going to leave. Not permanently, okay? Not permanently, but Pluto's actually moving out of Capricorn. Now, I've been doing horoscopes for about 12 years now, and Pluto has been set in Capricorn this whole time. And that was only half the time that Pluto was in Capricorn. Pluto had been in Capricorn for probably another at least 10 years before then. So this is a big deal for Capricorn to leave, or I'm sorry, for Pluto to leave Capricorn. But what's going to happen this year is Pluto's going to leave, move into Aquarius. I'm the Aquarius over here going, yay, I'm really excited about that. And then it's going to go retrograde and it's going to move back to Capricorn. And for the next few years, it's like Capricorn and Aquarius are playing volleyball with Pluto as it moves back and forth before it finally gets far enough into Aquarius that when it retrogrades, it actually doesn't leave. And that's probably going to be I would say the next few years, at least 3. I don't know for sure because I haven't looked that far ahead, but it is going to be happening for at least the next few years or so. Not this week though. And while Pluto is not in conjunction with the Sun and Mercury this week, next week they probably, the Sun will probably be in conjunction with Pluto. The moon moving into Cancer at the end of the week may put all 3 of these planets in opposition with the moon. The moon's focus is on home. Capricorn's focus is on career. This creates a little bit of a challenge. And opposition between home and career is one of those classic cases where you just feel like you're being split between 2 places. You have career goals, you want to focus on them, but you have responsibilities at home, and those responsibilities at home seem to be pulling you back to home. This can also be an illness, meaning that you're stuck at home because you're sick and unfortunately don't have the energy to put towards your career goals. But we're talking a couple of days at the end of the week here, not the entire week, which is also important for us to look at as well. The moon affects this. So Friday and Saturday, not great days for you to focus on your career goals. But up until then, focus away. Mercury being retrograde does always throw a wrench in things, especially in a specifically well-oiled Capricorn schedule where you have everything set up that you want to do. And unfortunately, Mercury's retrograde is going to throw wrenches into that, and that's going to make things frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. Just a little bit of frustration. The more patience you have, the easier it will be to get through it for sure. With Pluto's focus on your career goals as well, we're talking about Pluto is your source of personal power. It's also your source of transformation. And while Capricorns are not necessarily known for changing or like to change or being changeable, it is very much sitting there and telling you, look, sometimes things have to change in order for you to move forward. So it's sort of putting that energy towards your development. You can never stay the same and move up. It doesn't work like that. You have to learn new things. You have to grasp new concepts. You have to be willing to change the way you do things in order to move forward. And it's not that it's impossible. You just have to put yourself in the mindset that it's okay to do it. You need to do this. You want to do this. And if you know that you can do anything and rock at it. So just because it's new doesn't mean that you're not going to rock at it. Okay. You want to keep that in mind as well. Also, the Sun, Mercury, and Pluto all line up in sextiles with Jupiter. Jupiter's all about growth and expansion, but very much focused on the inner closet. Now, we're talking about personal traumas here, which is not necessarily something that you would think is helpful towards your career, but eliminating some of those personal traumas may help you eliminate some of the roadblocks that we set up for ourselves that sort of keep us from moving forward, if that makes sense. So being aware of that and working through that also helps you to just kind of eliminate that. So you're not carrying it around. I look at personal trauma as bags full of garbage. Some of us have 2 bags full of garbage and it's pretty heavy to walk down the street with it, but we do it. We drag it with us and we don't necessarily put it down. I don't know why, but we don't necessarily put it down. We drag it with us. It is heavy. Some people have like 10 bags of garbage. Now, imagine an individual walking down the street with 10 full bags of garbage. It's almost impossible. You're not moving very quickly. And for Capricorns, you don't really want anything getting in your way, do you? You just want to get in there, get it done, move on, next thing. So you definitely want to be putting down some of those bags of garbage if you have them. That will help you to be able to move into what it is that you're doing without having to be hampered by anything that shouldn't be hampering you right now. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Aquarius, focus is on our support system, those that support you. And I have really good news, as Wednesday is the end of that square between Saturn and Uranus. And we're talking the end, the end. It's not coming back at all. We don't have to worry about it anymore. I'm really happy to hear about it because honestly, it has been very difficult for me. Being an Aquarius myself, I have felt the effects of these 2 planets not working together quite a lot. I have felt the effects of Saturn quite a lot also. And Saturn, we're ending the week at 23 degrees. So that also means that Saturn is moving out at some point, which is good. Probably in the next couple of months. So we're not talking the next few weeks, unfortunately, but there is an end in sight. Saturn moved into Aquarius in March of 2020, and we all know what happened in March of 2020. The whole entire world just fell apart. I found that interesting, of course, because we also entered an age of Aquarius at that time, and major changes socially and technologically, and just all kinds of major changes do take place during age of Aquarius as well. So this pandemic really did set us on a course of nothing that used to exist does anymore, and we don't really know what the world is going to look like afterwards. However, it could be better. I'm going to hold out hope that it is better anyways. We have Venus moving into Aquarius as well, bringing us a creative focus on our career this week as well. And Venus's sextile with Neptune is very helpful, although a little bit annoying at the same time, because Neptune's focus really is on that secret closet. We've already spent some time in the secret closet already. It's not like we really, any of us are all that excited to spend more time on that secret closet. I know I'm not, but that's okay. Actually, Neptune is all about intuition, and it's actually using our intuition to clean out that closet, if that makes sense. In some cases, using your intuition to clean out that closet does help you. Understanding where somebody else is coming from, somebody who victimized you, and understanding where somebody else is coming from, and using your intuition to get to that point. It changes the way you look at the situation. So, for instance, in my own trauma as a child, understanding that this man was very much abused by his mother and therefore took it out on every woman that he ever knew, whether they were little or not, it didn't matter. Having that understanding of why he did that took it off of me being the bad person, and that's why I was the victim. And usually, when you're in an abusive situation, they want you to think it's you. And that's really a big part of what we can't let go of, is the fact that we made a mistake, we caused this trauma on ourselves, and then we carry that with us our whole entire lives. Now go back to my trauma, understanding that this man who created this trauma was severely abused by a narcissistic mother. It does make sense. I don't like it. I still don't excuse the behavior, but now it's not on me anymore. I know that it's not my fault. I didn't go out of my way to ask for this. I didn't go out of my way to deserve this. This is just a messed up individual, and I happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It does make it a little bit easier if you look at it from a different point of view. Um, in terms of Venus's creativity in your career, looking at that, again, we Aquarians are not necessarily creative people. We do like to daydream, we do like to come up with a lot of ideas. There's some creativity there. Not the best at the follow through, but we can work on that. Let's make that our New Year's resolution. We can work on that. Bottom line is that you can't always come up with black and white ideas. Sometimes you have to get a little bit creative, especially if something isn't working right. You got to get a little creative to make it work right. You got to step out of the box a little bit, which is what we're good at. That's our forte, after all. You got to step out of the box a little bit to look at it from a different point of view. And remember, as Aquarians, we tend to go against the grain. So we're not jumping on the same bandwagon as everybody else. In fact, we hate doing that. I detest doing that. And yet at the same time, in my business, I will come up with an idea to do something and go, I've never seen anybody else do that, so I'm not going to do it. It just doesn't make any sense at all, right? And yes, I'm looking at myself in the mirror going, that didn't make any sense at all. But no one says we weren't contradictory people either. Okay. Bottom line is, human beings make things complicated for themselves when they don't need to. And I feel that our New Year's resolution really should be all about not complicating something that doesn't need to be complicated. Just because our brains are wired to fix complicated problems doesn't mean that we need to create complications in order to slow ourselves down. And that creative influence coming in to, in some way, influence what we're doing in our career is helpful. It's going to give us some ideas. It's going to give us bring a little bit of a feminine energy into it also. Not to say that Aquarians are not feminine, but they are more a masculine sign. We need some of that femininity every now and then, that creative feminine, to see how we can improve things a bit, because that is what the feminine energy does. Also, we have a trine between Venus and Mars all week long. Mars is focused on the past, so that also kind of sort of shows us where we might have been creative in the past and where it was helpful. So it kind of gives us a boost, or a little bit more of an energetic boost towards using that creativity now and seeing where it takes you. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's not the end of the world. And we don't need to be thinking about it in terms of the end of the world either. That's really important. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And finally, Pisces, Jupiter is officially out of your sign, not even on the cusp anymore. So we just have Neptune to focus on in Pisces. Focus is on that secret closet, that inner closet, that emotional place where old trauma lives. Not exactly the most fun thing in the world to be focused in on, especially for a Pisces, because most Pisces are pretty emotional to begin with. When you're unfortunately bringing up triggers of past trauma, that just makes things even more difficult. At the same time, though, having a focus on that inner trauma is important. It's never pleasant. Nobody ever wants to deal with it, but it is important. Sometimes we just need to work through our triggers in order to understand them and put that trauma in its place so that it's not ruling everything that we're doing currently right now. Neptune's trine with the moon right at the end of the week is sort of helpful for that. The moon's focus is on the home. This can, of course, indicate that some of those triggers are coming up from people that are in your home or people that are closest to you, which doesn't make things easier. But it sort of, with the, because of the fact that the moon is an emotional influence as well, when these triggers come up, it gives you an opportunity to work through them, to understand why it's a trigger and why this specific type of behavior always bothers you. It may be from the person, it's true, but if the person is doing something that mimics a feeling that you had as a child dealing with trauma, then it's not the person, it's your own trauma reaction. And making the person stop doing that isn't the answer, unfortunately. The answer is understanding where that root comes from, where that feeling comes from. Is it, for instance, if somebody is constantly leaving you, you get into a fight, they always walk out the door and they leave you. This can create an abandonment trauma response, because maybe your parents, maybe you were adopted, maybe your parents just weren't emotionally available when you were a child. Maybe you had a best friend that moved away and that just created that trauma response. There's a million things that will create an abandonment response. Even death as a child, somebody dying when you're a child triggers an abandonment response also. Is that right? No, not necessarily, but we're talking about a child's perception here, not an adult's perception. And if you don't work through the child's perception, you have a problem, unfortunately, because the adult keeps seeing things from that same point of view, from a child's point of view, and not necessarily from an adult's point of view. Neptune's sextiles with Mercury, the Sun, and Jupiter are also helpful. These planets are focused on career. Again, we're working through our inner trauma. How is that going to affect our career in a good way? Well, it does. It really does, because for a couple of different things. First of all, our inner trauma stops us from moving forward in our career. If it mimics any of those traumatic feelings, we're not going to pursue that particular career, because we're afraid that those things are going to keep coming up. If you work through those things, they're not coming up. You can actually adore pursue that career, because you don't have those fears necessarily that are holding you back. And Neptune itself is a very emotional planet, but also is represents intuition and the intuitive abilities. And in many cases, old trauma does really get in the way of using our intuition, because that old trauma, there's a lot of fears attached to it. Of course, if you are leading with fear, you're not leading with logic. And if you're not leading with logic, you're not making a good decision. Bottom line is that when triggers come up, and they do absolutely randomly, I mean, you don't even know when it's going to happen, and bam, it just happens. And sometimes you're working. I have a lot of triggers come up when I'm working with my clients, just because I am being triggered by their experience. Now, I can't allow myself to react to that trigger while I'm on the phone with somebody that I'm trying to help work through their own trigger. It doesn't work like that. It's not good for them. It's not good for me. It's not good for anybody, right? I have to set that trigger aside. And when I'm done with my client, pick it back up and hold it and look at it and say, okay, what is upsetting me about this? And when I can identify that this person was sexually abused and I'm being triggered because of my own sexual abuse, then I know. And sexual abuse triggers our trauma is so hard to work through. I will tell you that. It's probably the worst one. But if I can sit there and I can tell myself, and I can tell my inner child, this isn't happening to us right now. We have complete control over the situation right now. Nobody is taking anything from us right now. If I allow the trigger or if I allow myself to emotionally react to the trigger, then my anger is going to come out in front of that client. Then my own trauma responses and emotions are going to come out in front of that client. And that is not a safe place for the client. The client is already in that space. I don't need to be in that space with the client as well. That's not helping them. That's going to create a trauma response for them. Everything just gets all bad at that point. Bottom line for you guys is that when triggers come up, it is important to set them aside if it's not an appropriate time to go through them, and pick them back up afterwards. Hold on to them. Look at them. Say, trauma trigger, what do you want? And when you understand where the trauma trigger comes from, you can let that go. It's not something that's happening to you right now. Tell the child, I've got it. I have control of it. You're totally fine. Nothing bad is going to happen to you, and let that go. Then you can move on to do all of the things that you need to do. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And that is what I have for everybody. Thank you for coming and hanging out. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Don't forget that it is the first week of the year. So it's time to get our goals started. It's time to get everything moving. It's time to be badass, okay? Because I expect nothing less from you or from me. You guys have a great week, and I will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody.